Hey guys, so if you look at the date of this body cam, it is the 15th. So it was literally 2 weeks and 1 day after this that Brian was actually arrested. And if you think about it, could he not have been arrested on this day, right? If they had taken his details, would it have fed through the police network? I don't know if there's an interchange between Pennsylvania. I don't know if it goes like into a national system, but who knows? They could have sort of fast-tracked the investigation if they hadn't just let him off on a warning. Now, it kind of feels a bit like the Gabby Petito case, and maybe it's a bit unfair to say that, because if you did that, you would say anybody that transgresses slightly, arrest them or charge them, whatever. That's not really what we're saying, but we are trying to think critically about what happened here. So I just want to play a little bit further, and then I want you to look at the door, the passenger side door where his father is. Just look how grimy and dirty that door is. And after that, we're going to have a look at Brian's hand and also his face, and just see if we can see something there. It looks like this is 10 to 4 in the afternoon, if that's the right local time. And another 2 days after the crime. So what is unfortunate with the body cam is this is really it in a way. You basically get a quick view of Brian and his father, and then for pretty much the rest of the time the camera actually tilts downwards and you just see the road and his foot. There is additional footage from the dash cam, but what is quite interesting with this footage is you do get a very good look at the outside of the body. Now, one does wonder, is this just normal grime from driving as far as they've driven? Or was the car generally not very well looked after? What do you guys think? Timmy, do you want to get up here? Come. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I think we're going to start off by looking at the some images that I've saved of Brian's hand and face, and I want to thank Thought Criminal for sending those on. Thanks very much. So let's just have a look at see if we can bring that up. So there is kind of a zoomed in image of Brian's hand, obviously his right hand. And it's hard to make out what that is. Is that something? If that is something, it looks like quite a serious whatever it is. Is there anything going on over there? It's difficult to say. But yeah, some of the eagle-eyed folks in true crime passed this on to me. That is what you want to look at. You do want to look at his hands especially. And I guess if there's anything to say here, that will be mentioned in the probable cause affidavit. I mean, that would definitely be probable cause injuries, cutting type injuries on his hands, right, or wrists. And then there's also this, when you look at his face, I don't know whether that's any kind of injury. Hard to say. But that was certainly brought to my attention. Is there something going on there? Hard to say. So in terms of the poll that that I asked you guys to vote in. Make sure you do vote if you haven't. Were you surprised by Brian's appearance? And have you guys seen this image of Brian? Let's see if I can bring it up. Have you guys seen that image of Brian? Thanks to SM Kovalinsky for sending that through. Let's have a look at some of your comments. So Miami says it's over a month later. Would they be scars and faint? Or bear in mind, it's just over a month later in terms of that body cam footage. So a month and 1 day. A cut, quite a serious cut, wouldn't heal very, very quickly if it was quite a serious cut. So bruises and that sort of thing, that would definitely heal. That's a good point. Wouldn't his students have noticed facial injuries? That's a good point. Angela says he looks super worried. Well, in that previous image. I think most of us would be quite worried being stopped, but you can imagine if he is responsible, that the hairs on the back of his neck would have been sort of erect, especially since that was actually the second stop of the day, right? Did you guys notice in the footage of Kohberger stepping out of the sheriff's van, just how he sort of made a furtive look? Did you notice how he almost instantly looked to the right and then the next thing he just looked in front of him? Did you guys notice that? I actually want to come back to that, but do you know, if you make this comment, you say, if looks could kill, right? It sounds like just a throwaway comment that we sometimes say, but if you're talking about this idea that someone coveted, and the coveting was going on for so long, and that the coveting eventually led to murder, then it is actually a case of if looks could kill, because someone was looking and staring, and that long period of looking at something with feelings of insufficiency, feelings of loneliness, feelings of despair, doesn't that then start with looking and it ends with killing, right? If you take the looking out of the equation, just follow me on that. If you take the looking entirely out of the equation, you just don't pay attention to this thing that you're paying attention to. In other words, you change your focus, then how can the crime actually take place? So can you see how if looks could kill, well, if you didn't look, you wouldn't kill. Does that make sense? Terry Dean, good to have you here. Thanks a lot for sending through the body cam. We're going to go back to that in a second. Sparkly Unicorn says, why do you think that killers have those blank, dead, cold eyes? I don't think that's really the case. I think it's projection. You are seeing that. I think there is a aspect where a person's humanity has been lost. And I was actually just watching the movie Tombstone, where the guy says something about, do you believe in the devil or something? And he says something about, I don't know, it's the villain in the story, and he says, yeah, I sold my soul a long time ago. That is an aspect, but I think one's got to be very careful of projecting what you're thinking, especially at this stage. But if you look at the picture to my, I guess it's right, the way you guys are looking at it, don't you think he actually looks like quite a decent human being? He looks like a well-groomed, well brought up, neat fellow. I mean, compare him to Brian Laundrie. Would you really imagine that this is a guy who maybe struggles with the opposite sex, or doesn't have friends, or has a dark side to him? I'm speaking about this image in particular. If you look at this picture, does he seem like a particularly bad person, just in terms of his appearance? Susan says he looks studious. Sorry about that. Where is that coming from? Sorry about that. Okay, we're going to come back to that. I guess if we don't come back to it soon enough, it's going to force us to come back to it. Annika says, good to see you from South Africa. Annika says, I just wonder if he's got a injury. As I said, that'll probably come up in the probable cause affidavit if it's relevant. Rochelle, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so let's have a look at your answers to the poll. What surprised you most about the latest footage of Brian Kohberger? 43% say he was taller than I expected. 10% say he's better looking than I thought. 16% say he doesn't look like a monster. So it seems like most of you think he does look like a monster. I've got to say, I was quite surprised that he was a lot better looking than I imagined. And one's got to wonder, what is the problem here? Is the problem nurture? Is the problem his own low self-esteem? Is the problem, I don't know what he sounds like. I suppose one's got to hear him speak and interact, but one does wonder, is the problem his confidence problem, right? And I think the thing that stood out to me by far the most wasn't any of those things. Wasn't how tall he was, wasn't how skinny he was, wasn't how not handsome he was, or handsome he was, sorry, not ugly he was. The thing that actually stood out to me the most was, I sort of looked at him and I thought, okay, fair enough, but you do look a lot older than the victims. Did you guys not get that sense that he does present as someone who's is not like a young university student, right? He seems like someone who should already have a job, doesn't he? Let's have a look at, not really that image, but if we look at that picture, he isn't really, if you compare him to the victims, don't you think he looks decidedly older than what they are? He would also be very much taller than what they are. I mean, he's 6 foot and is a lot taller than all the officers around him. So can you imagine if he actually attended one of those parties? He would really stick out, not only because he was taller, but also because he was older. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Yeah, he kind of looks mature. And I don't know whether that counts against him. He sort of looks mature, but is he mature? He looks mature, but is he actually quite immature? So that's the other thing that I think, if you watch quite a lot of footage of him, and I do want to play some video of him kind of walking out. If you watch the footage of him, you got to imagine this idea of him stalking or kind of skulking around the neighborhood. Do you really think no one would have noticed him if he was there for a length of time? That they wouldn't notice this particularly tall, skinny, older looking dude who didn't actually live there? It's kind of like the suspect in the Vicky White fugitive scenario. So a really big guy would definitely stand out. Well, Kohberger is also like that. He's not big, but he is the kind of person who couldn't sort of blend in a crowd kind of thing. If he was skulking around the neighborhood, you'd probably notice him. You'd notice that he's older, and you'd notice that he is quite a tall fellow, right? So let me see if I can play some footage of him actually moving around. So yeah, this is him actually walking around, walking out of the court.
This is Brian Kohberger, the accused killer of 4 college students, as he made his way into a Pennsylvania courtroom. He waived his extradition hearing. He will be on his way back to Idaho sometime over the course of the next several days, but it could waived his extradition.
So there he does it again. He sort of makes this very quick, furtive glance, right? Let me play it again.
Way into a Pennsylvania courtroom. He waived his extradition hearing.
So why did it do that?
He waived his extradition.
Stay. Okay. So what's quite strange with Kohberger is in some images he presents quite well. He actually seems quite confident, even a little bit masculine. And then when you see him moving, he seems to blink nervously. And here is another example of, look how wide his eyes are when he sort of looks that way. Now, if you imagine a different version of him, if you just imagined a different version of him walking out, and instead of looking like that, I don't know, can you guys see my face? Instead of looking like that or that, just look. And the fact that he's doing that furtiveness, I think, shows a lack of confidence in himself. And isn't that really what we're dealing with? Do you know what I mean? And if you take a person like him and you put him into a certain situation, people are going to play off his sense of self as much as they're going to make their own assessments. So in other words, the fact that he comes from not a particular prestigious university, who cares if he's a really charming, charismatic kind of guy? But if he's kind of taking his cue from the way someone else is assessing him, then that might be really what is going on. He's so sensitive that he ends up being put into a corner, right? And I must say, one area that I've kind of had to change my thinking was, I thought that he was a bully throughout, but what happened was he was originally bullied at school and then he became a bully, right? Does he look like a bully? And don't you kind of get the sense that because he is fearful, because he's anxious, because he's sensitive, the way that he tries to regain control is by trying to be intimidating, trying to be bullying. This is the same guy who annoyed a class of 150 kids where 75 complained and criticized him, saying, "You're grading us too harshly," right? So there is a bit of a chip on his shoulder, because I think on the one hand he feels I should be getting more respect, or I should be getting more something, and for whatever reason I'm not. But is that somebody else's fault or is it his fault? Is esteem his responsibility, or is it something that should be given to him? What do you guys think? So Firefly says, I find it very difficult to believe he would go to one of the parties. Thanks a lot. Thanks for that. Anne versus Elvis says, no doubt some women will be writing him fan letters. Yeah, definitely. Stephanie, good to see you here. Okay, so let's just watch a little bit more of that. But do you see how bigger difference it makes seeing the photos we've seen, and then you actually see him in motion. You see him actually moving around, and you get a totally different idea. When you see him blinking, you kind of get the sense that he's quite nervous. It's kind of a nervous blinking, right? And you might say, well, anyone would be nervous in that situation. That's a fair comment. That is a fair comment. Gina, thanks a lot for that. Thank you. Okay, so let's play a little bit more of this.
Hearing. He will be on his way back to Idaho sometime over the course of the next several days, but it could be as soon as tonight. And we could learn even more about what happened inside that house in Moscow. Kohberger was, of course, arrested on Friday. News Nation has learned he was a PhD student at a nearby university studying criminology. Let's bring in now senior national. It could be as.
Okay, so what I want you guys to focus on again is this furtive look that he gives, right? He steps out of the sheriff's prisoner transport, and he gives this very quick look, and then he continues walking and he doesn't look again, right? And when we play this, it'll loop twice, so you'll get two chances to see that. But the thing that I want you to think about is he's a tall guy, right? But he's not like a big, muscular, sort of hulking football player. He's tall and skinny. We know that he weighed 185 pounds, which is 83 kilograms. That sounds like a lot, but it's really not a lot for someone who's 6 foot. So he's actually a skinny guy. He looks a lot more puffed up and I don't want to say fat, but he looks more heavy set because he's wearing, I think, a bulletproof vest under that red overall, right? That red jumpsuit. But notice when he walks and how he furtively glances to the right. Doesn't it kind of send a message of a guy who's a little bit high strung, a guy who's well, I mean, you ask yourself, does he exude confidence and a sort of a, does he look like a tough guy, or does he seem like a little bit of a reed quivering in the wind, right? But take note how he very slyly and very quickly glances to the right and then looks in front of him. Let's watch.
As soon as tonight, and we could learn even more.
You can almost not see it.
The next several days, but it could be as soon as tonight, and we could learn even more about what happened inside that house in Moscow. Kohberger was, of course, arrested on Friday. News Nation has learned he was a PhD student at a nearby university studying criminology. Let's bring in now senior national correspondent.
Okay. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean by that sort of furtiveness and that there's almost like a bird-like quality, if you know what I'm saying? Now, if you think I'm kind of overstating things, I actually once sat in a courtroom with a triple X murderer, and what crossed my mind while I was watching the trial was I was thinking, you got to be pretty aware of your surroundings to execute a triple X murder with an axe. That's even tougher than with a knife. You've got to be pretty sensitive to your surroundings in order to execute that crime. You've got to be aware of you've got to have spatial awareness. You've got to be quite sensitive to and anticipating, right? And doesn't that also apply here? And so, again, you might say, really, wow, I think you're really overthinking it. But the moment he steps out of that transport, he quickly glances to his right. He quickly assesses the scene, and then he's seen enough, and he kind of carries on walking forward. Now, the same trial that I sat in with that triple X murderer, there was a moment where he actually came off the stand. I think it was the first day, and he actually brushed by me. And as he approached the door, he sort of turned around and he said something to me. And I couldn't help thinking afterwards, all of that was completely premeditated. Because I was actually the only journalist at that time that had written a book about him. And so I had the impression that he knew about me and he didn't want other people to understand that. And so when there was this encounter where he brushed by me, he did it in such a way that no one else actually saw it. And also in a way that he got my attention just long enough to sort of seamlessly move from the witness stand past me and out the door. And it kind of felt choreographed, exactly the way a crime would need to be choreographed. He had to have thought about it before he did it, right? It's quite a incredible, I think, insight to try and imagine someone who's anticipating movements and counter moves in a house, in four walls, in a particular structure. And then you look at how they are moving in real life and how they think about their movements, right? And what's his name? Haley Stinchfield, I think is his name. I actually reached out to him, but so did a lot of journalists. He actually said that he seemed to premeditate his lectures. He would come to the lectures with not programmed answers, but he knew how he was going to deal with particular questions. And he said he got a sense of that he was preoccupied, and also that he had prepared what he was going to say. He wasn't really thinking on his feet. And that also shows, I think, a lack of confidence. Do you guys agree with that? Gina says, I think he's just noticing the cameras to the right and not interested in being on them. Yeah, you could think that. You could think, oh, he's just looking at the camera. Maybe if that was you, you might be interested in where the camera is. But it's also spatial awareness, and he's not, why doesn't he give like a full look round, right? What I'm trying to convey here is a nervous personality, a kind of jittery, anxious personality. And you may disagree with that and say, no, I don't think he was nervous at all. But if he was nervous, then that suggests someone who's more of a spectator, someone who's more of a, how can I put it? Someone who's not participating, but they are looking in from the outside, right? Do you follow what I'm trying to say? And in other words, it's showing, yeah, Susan says it's hypervigilance. That's also interesting. Is he enjoying the attention? If he is enjoying the attention, you could say he's a narcissist. He did this because he wants to be a famous criminal. But he may actually be kind of an introvert, and his deal with the world is actually a private deal. He's not trying to be a celebrity. Pharaoh says from reports, he slept the whole time. Okay. That's what I thought, yeah. Okay, let's have a look at some of your comments here. Okay, so let's go back to the body cam. We'll get there in a second. I really didn't expect to be doing a live now. I thought I was going to be doing one in 2 hours about other stuff, but here we go. So I'm getting really hot with you, Lionel. So there we get a really clear view of the vehicle that there's been such a fuss about. And obviously, can you see the one thing in this image that law enforcement really needed? Aren't you getting hot? What is the one thing that you see in this image that law enforcement wish they had all along? Let's see if what you guys say. Yeah, the car is pretty dirty. There you go. Yeah, the plate number. So if they had been able to get a clear view of the vehicle, just like we have here, looks like it's CF88708. I think that is what it is. Let's see if we can get a slightly better view. Yeah, CF88708. If they just had that, just think about how quickly they could have solved this case. And I do think the question does arise: did they actually have the license plate? Like, eventually, did they? How can I put it? Did they first spot that there was a car, and then they got some CCTV, then they got some more CCTV, and they eventually got the license plate? Another thing they could have done, which I think would have made total sense, is they could have gone through the student registrations in Moscow, gone through all of those vehicles, found that there's not a match for what they were looking for, and then gone to the next student campus, the next nearest student campus. Isn't that what they did? Because if you think about it, it didn't really take that long to solve this case, less than 50 days. And the cops were already surveilling Brian at this point, right? I think they were following them for, like, what was it, 4 days? Was it from this point? Not 100% sure. I think from what was it, the 21st to about Christmas. So I guess that's an open question. Were the cops surveilling? Did the cops actually say, hey, I don't know, that like goes into the realm of conspiracy theory. Did cops tell these cops, just stop him and let's get a look at him? I don't know. Thanks, Anada. Thanks a lot. But anyway, the point being, if they'd just gotten that license plate, just think how much faster this case could have been solved. In terms of the Food Mart surveillance and the the Linda Lane surveillance. Now, Brian Enton did actually say that there's ring doorbell cameras coming off the elevated parking lot, homes off the elevated parking lot. Those probably would have showed lights. What do you call it? Lights at night. So that would at least tell you that a car was somewhere. And that'll actually tell us, we may find out in the probable cause affidavit where he actually parked the vehicle. But it does make one wonder, do those skid marks in front of the house, are they a match for this vehicle? And yeah, the other thing, how many of you always thought all along that the driver of the vehicle was likely the killer in this case, that the cops were looking for the vehicle because they thought it was the killer, not because they just thought it was a witness? How many of you guys thought that? Yeah, so Carlita, that's such a good point. Is we already know that he's OCD about his veganism, so why wouldn't he be hypervigilant and kind of nervous? And so I think what we're trying to do is get a sense of this nervous, kind of high-strung, maybe overly sensitive. Is an intelligent individual, but he's also struggling to control his struggling, I guess, to control his sensitivity. You could even say he's overly sensitive, right? And you can sometimes see, tell me I'm wrong, you can sometimes see that a person is overly sensitive just in the way they move their eyes, in the way they blink. They might blink like that. There might be a slight sound and they blink. You know what I mean? The way people's eyes move give you a sense of their sense of self to some extent, right? Kerry says, why did Ali say they were looking for blah, blah, blah? I think they assumed it was that. It could also be, I don't know if I would say that they were trying to, what's the word, make the suspect feel reassured. I wouldn't take it that far. Do we know for a fact that this is a 2015 model? It could also be like a simple error that, you know, that saying that I often say, when the, what do you, how do you say it? When one note is off, you ruin the whole symphony. Or getting that one part wrong may have made it so much harder to find this vehicle. Maybe. That's quite a good point, and I do think it is very interesting to think about two aspects, and I'm going to deal with one of them in upcoming video. Did he wash the car, right? And if so, where? Because I don't think it would be a very simple case to just wash the car. If you watch Pulp Fiction, it's not the easiest thing to do in the world. That's the one question. The other question is, did he wash himself at the crime scene? And someone came up with a fascinating, I saw some fascinating conjecture somewhere that if he did wash his hands in the house, then that's maybe how they got hold of his DNA, is literally him washing his hands, and then the DNA from his hands may have actually caught on the side of the drain wherever he washed his hands. So in other words, him washing his hands may have been how they got his DNA, got the killer's DNA. In the Letitia Stork case, there's a car that was washed. Damn, it keeps doing this. Sorry about that. I think we're gonna, let's just play this and deal with it. Otherwise it's gonna keep happening. So this was the second stop in, does anyone know how long? Was it an hour? How long was it between both stops? Okay, so if we look at this image, you can get quite a good view of that. Appears to be a mark there. Is that a birthmark? Could that be a birthmark? I guess. Anyway, it looks like there's a mark there, right? The inside of the vehicle, do you guys agree the inside looks pretty clean? And one wonders whose phone is that? Is that Brian's phone or is that his father's phone? And one also wonders, just in terms of this image, what is going on with that hand there? Is he just got his hand on his knee? Would you normally have your hand there in that situation? Wouldn't you have your hand sort of on the steering wheel? What's going on with that hand there? So bear in mind what's just happened here is they were stopped a few minutes earlier. This is a second stop. Now, wouldn't a natural thought be that perhaps they'd run the license plate and they know something?
Belongs to state, please get your license registration. I stopped you when you're driving by.
So when you look at this, it does make you wonder what is actually on the outside of this vehicle. Is it just ordinary grime, or is there something else?
I mean, you're a little too close back at semi. One car between you and the back of this trailer. We're about one car with 32 miles an hour, so we're going 60 or 70 miles an hour. We're about 6 or 7 cars. Oh, you guys did? Yeah.
Because in terms of probable cause, did you guys know this? They actually did get Brian's DNA shortly after he was arrested, so they've gotten his DNA directly. But the other thing that could be quite interesting is if they impounded the vehicle, which they did, and they found any of the victim's DNA in the vehicle, that would also be probable cause, right? You got stopped by a trooper? We don't have any SUVs. Maybe it was a county guy. Was it like a black SUV? Okay, all right. You said you guys following too closely? So obviously, I mean, I feel a little weird saying this because people will take it out of proportion, but that kind of looks like a reddish color. I don't think it is what people may say it is. It's first of all, it's the wrong side of the vehicle. Let's take this comment away. But that is really what you want to be looking for in terms of the vehicle, is evidence of blood, fibers, etc., from the victims, more likely on the inside of the vehicle. And so it's not wrong to be looking at this. I just don't think that this is related to that.
Okay. Today? Well, I'm not going to give you guys another ticket or warning if you just got.
So let me ask you guys a question. I mean, you guys have local knowledge, especially those of you from these states. Do you think a car would sort of normally look like that, having driven this long distance? Or do you think it wasn't washed before? So in other words, do you think it got all of this grime from this long 2,000-mile trip? Or do you think it was just generally not washed? What would you guys say? Depends on the weather, okay? Okay, let's keep watching.
Stop. Just make sure you give yourself plenty of room, okay? So like I said, it's all about how fast you're going, okay? So if you're going 10 miles an hour, you're going.
So really the side of the vehicle that you really want to see is the other side. And if you look at those marks there, quite interesting.
Only one car. I think you're going, so speed limit here 7. You're going 70 miles an hour, you need 7 car miles. Yeah. That's the easy way to explain it. Yeah. Okay. It's really it's good in the B&B manual says 23 seconds. All right. You guys have a safe trip. Where y'all heading? Thank you so much for stopping. Where y'all heading to? We're at. Yeah, it's a long haul. You guys scared of airplanes?
So did you guys catch that? The guy says, "Are you scared of airplanes?" And I think that raises a very important question. were they scared of aeroplanes? Not so much his father, but do you think Brian was scared of flying, right? Compare what is going on here, right? Driving home to the Caitlin Armstrong case, where she sold her car, then she flew to New York from Austin, and then she flew somewhere else, and all of that was tracked. And, you know, if he's a student of crime, would he not have known about the Caitlin Armstrong case? We did. A lot of people on this channel knew that. So would you have felt it is safer? Let me ask you guys this question. Do you think it was more prudent to drive home or to fly home? Right? Let me type that question in chat. See what you guys say. Do you think it was more prudent? This is from a criminal psychology point of view. To drive than to fly. Have I spelled that right? Rona says better chance at driving. June's bug says fly. Celeste says he knew he had to get the car out of there. That is a really good point. I agree with that. I think he did know that he had to get the car out of there. And the other thing, if you look at the date of this, and you look at what was coming out in the news, that they were starting to look for an Elantra. I think that came out, I think the news that they were looking for an Elantra came out on the 7th. So you wouldn't want to leave the vehicle there, right? If you left the vehicle there, you could have a YouTuber or a cop or member of the public seeing the vehicle, taking a photo and sending it to the cops. So you'd want to get that car out of there, right? Let me ask a stupid question. Which is cheaper, driving cross-country in America, in terms of gas prices, or the price of a 4-hour flight? Which would be cheaper? Yeah, that's it. Airport should have been notified. It would have been on the flight register, you know, everyone who was flying out, but probably his car might be in long-term airport parking. And if it wasn't in long-term airport parking, where would you park it? Yeah, that's true. His father flew into Washington. Well, yeah, probably Washington. Yeah. So in the Gabby Petito case, do you remember we said, why didn't they at least ask for the driver's license and registration? Remember? And because, I mean, he was actually speeding. Why not just ask for Brian's driver's license? Just makes you kind of think about that as well. What is... Run the World, welcome. Okay. Yeah, driving is less of a paper trail. Cheaper to drive. Do you guys agree with that it is cheaper to drive? Because if it is cheaper to drive, doesn't that, it's just such a weird thing. If it's cheaper to drive, then I suppose you can make the argument that this family had a bit of a financial issue to deal with. On the other hand, if his father flew there, were finances really such an issue? For two people, it is cheaper to drive. Thought Criminal says it's probably even. I know, yeah, in South Africa, they purposely make the tickets so that it's about the same price. And of course, wear and tear on your vehicle would make it more expensive. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting question. Are you afraid to fly? I think you've got to try and address that question from a criminal psychology perspective. And I think the answer is yes, because think about it. If Brian flew back, then he would appear on the airport CCTV camera, and theoretically so would his vehicle. If he doesn't take his vehicle, where does he leave his vehicle? He doesn't really have too much of a choice. If he flies, he's got to do something about his vehicle. Well, what is he going to do about it? Where is he going to leave it? Anywhere he leaves it, the license plate is going to trace back to him. So he kind of, if you think about it, it comes down to, I need to get this car as far from, as far from the crime scene as possible. The other side of it is his father there to make it look like, oh, it's Dad and me on a road trip? In other words, is his father possibly manipulated into this so that if they are stopped, or if someone does find this vehicle, it sort of looks like, oh, this is just Dad and me on a road trip. I'm not, do you see what I'm saying? I think it is worth thinking of it as far as that is concerned. Okay, so Thought Criminal says, Caitlin Armstrong got caught. Oh, damn, it just happened again. And you can... Okay. Let's try and get through this. Thanks a lot, Margaret Zabinski, and welcome, Colgirl 1. Okay. Let's try and get through a bit more of it this time. So I don't know if you can hear this. He's saying that he's from WSU. I think his father also says something about there was a shooting there, so his father's aware of that incident, and we were also aware of that incident. In fact, someone said to me, do you think these are related, the shooting and that? Well, the one was a shooting scenario, and that person ultimately died, and the police didn't see any connection. Why? Because probably there was no DNA connection there. Maybe they ran the DNA. What's the other aspect? What is the other thing I want to mention about that? So it is interesting that the father mentions that shooting incident at WSU, which means that he knew at least about one crime there. If he knew about that, didn't he know they were looking for an Elantra? On the other hand, you could imagine his son keep steering the conversation to the shooting incident. Keep concentrating on that. Yeah, we did think about that at a certain point. Where's Amy's there? We did think about that. We did consider that.
Today? Well, I'm not going to give you guys another ticket or warning if you just got stopped. Just make sure you give yourself plenty of room, okay? So like I said, it's all about how fast you're going, okay? So if you're going 10 miles an hour, you only need one car. Or if you're going, so speed limit here is 7. If you're going 70 miles an hour, you need 7 cars. Yeah. That's the easy way to explain it. Yeah. It's really easy in the B&B meeting that says 23 seconds. All right, you guys have a safe trip. Where y'all headed? Thank you so much. Where y'all headed to? Where?
So I don't want to make too much of a deal of this, but where the cop sort of steps back and he's about to sort of release them, Kohberger, you can hear him say, "Thank you so much." Do you remember Brian doing the same thing? Brian Laundrie. He kept thanking the officers, being very polite, right? Again, I'm just saying what I'm thinking. Jeffrey Dahmer was actually caught, stopped on his very first crime. He actually had black garbage bags in the back with actually human remains in the back. His very first crime. And he was actually stopped by the police, I think, for driving erratically. And if the cops had just, in that instance, just paid a little bit more attention to what was going on, they could have saved how many lives? 12 lives, right? It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback, but I think it's also important just at least to think about it. So here you can hear Brian saying, "Thanks so much, officer. Thank you, thank you. Really, thank you for stopping me." I think most people would be quite irritated.
We're at PA. It's a long haul. You guys scared of airplanes? Okay. All right. Well, hey, peace out. Safe trip. Thank you, sir.
So Kristen says possibly they were already onto him here. That's definitely an interesting thought. And do you notice that it's an unmarked vehicle? Kind of an unmarked vehicle. Not quite sure how they alert. I think there are lights there. But yeah, let's just have a look at that vehicle again. I don't see any sign except with those lights that it's a police vehicle. Not even on the side. Well, I'm glad I saw that, because if I was in the States and a vehicle like that pulled up behind me, I would assume it's not a police car. So I guess I've learned something. Thanks a lot, Victoria. Good to see you here. Yeah, maybe not. So now we're going to see this from the dash cam's perspective. I think, yeah. So the vehicle is now here on the right-hand side. There it is. It's got some grime over there as well. It does make you wonder why they were stopping him, like why they were really stopping him. What was he really doing wrong here? Okay, so I'm going to back up a second. I just want to have a better look at the tires. Carol says being stopped and released would boost confidence. I want to have a look at the tires, just see if there's tread or no tread. Let's just have a look. Let's go back a bit further. Yeah, you can't really see, although there is a tread left in water. And would you guys say that that is a similar width to the tread that we see? It's very difficult to say because it's not up close. But wouldn't you say that that looks generally similar? look at some of your comments. That's all dirt. Nisi, good to see you here. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay. Duke says, is that the real father? Yeah, I think it is. I agreed. He did need to pull further off the road. That's really dangerous. It's a good point. Yeah, he seemed to pat the tap the back of the trunk. Not sure what that was about. Someone said, did he put a homing beacon on there? I don't think so. I think you'd see it. I agree. It's hard to say why he pulled him over. Let's just pause it over there. So if you think about like what happened here, he pulls them over for the second time, and then they kind of just have a conversation. You kind of just get a sense that the cop is getting a feel for these people, and maybe it's to assess how nervous Brian is, and also where they say they're going, because at this point they'd been going, I think, quite a long distance. It does make you wonder, was this just a routine stop or not? I've got to say, I'm not really sure. I can't really say for sure either way. I mean, would you guys say this is routine in America to be stopped for this sort of thing? Have you been stopped for this sort of thing? And then you don't even get a ticket. So I mean, what is the point of stopping him? Thanks a lot, Deborah. Oh, so what happens is it's routine. They check out of state because of trafficking. Okay. It's routine. Okay, cool. I know when I was in Australia, we went something like 1 or 2 kilometers per hour over the speed limit, and a vehicle pulled out, police vehicle, lights flashing, and then we pulled over, and it was like, sir, do you know how fast you were going? Yeah, 1 kilometer above the speed limit. Please don't do that again. And then off we went. So I guess that's routine in Australia. It's definitely not routine in my country. So you would want to know what's routine. Millie says, could Ali try to get a dirt sample? No, I doubt whether that is what was going on. I doubt that. But it's good to see you guys thinking. Okay. Right, I want to take you guys back to this video from News Nation. It's a little bit earlier today. Let's have a look at this.
To be coming into sharper focus. Robert Sherman is live in Moscow, Idaho with more on that. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning to you, Mitch. Still a lot of unanswered questions here in this case, but as you were saying, we are starting to get a more clear picture as to who Brian Kohberger is. For one thing, he lived less than 20 minutes away from where we are in Moscow, Idaho. He was living over in Pullman, Washington, which is home to Washington State.
So what you're about to see now are photos, I guess, footage of some of the items seized from Kohberger's apartment in Pullman, right? So this is not outside 112 King Road. This is them serving a warrant on his home, his student digs in Pullman, Washington.
University. That's where he was a PhD student in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminal.
So you do wonder what they're taking out there, and I suppose it could be papers. It could also be, I don't know whether they would have like a PC tower, but possibly if they could get hold of digital information, laptops. I don't know if he would have left that behind. As I said earlier, I actually did reach out to, is his name Hayden Stinchfield? I reached out to him on Instagram. I really wanted to just ask him what was the curriculum that Kohberger was teaching them, and what stood out from the curriculum. What was the focus in the run up to the murders? What was the focus in terms of their curriculum? In other words, what were they dealing with crime-wise in terms of the curriculum? It would just be interesting to know. As far as I know, someone has dealt with that. Someone in the media has dealt with that.
Criminology, and News Nation was there.
So one does wonder, what is that? Is it course materials? What are they carrying out there?
When his apartment was raided by the authorities just the other day, you can see those officials removing items from inside his unit and taking them away. He had just gotten his master's at DeSales University in Pennsylvania, and on the website Reddit, in a now deleted post, a man with the name Brian Kohberger, who claims to have been that student at DeSales University, says that he was searching for criminals to respond to a survey, asking them what was going through their heads.
So I want to highlight this aspect where he says, over the past 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by any of the following problems? Look at the first one, feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge, right? And one does wonder whether that question has to do with his own nervousness, or whether it's got to do with how am I supposed to act? In other words, does a criminal act nervous, or does a criminal not act nervous, and so how should I act? Or whether it's kind of really asking, are you going to be particularly nervous afterwards? What should I expect? And they might say, not at all. I haven't really felt very nervous at all. If they'd answered nearly every day to feeling nervous, maybe he wouldn't have committed the crime, the killer. Right? Or let me put this a different way. If this was research for a crime and the answer here was, I feel nervous every single day, maybe that would have, well, do you think it would have been a incentive or a disincentive?
As they committed their respective crimes and what their processes may have been like. We spoke with one of the department's notable alums here from Washington State University.
So this is another thing I want to bring up, and it's just Josie says, the most interesting channel. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. See if I can actually do that. Thanks a lot, Josie. So you guys are going to laugh when I say this, but I just feel like it's important to do this. I'm very aware. I mean, I studied marketing, I studied brand management, and I'm very aware in crimes as well of things like colors and what sort of brands people associate with, because that tells you something about your identity as well. And in this case, we've got the colors and branding of a university. The University of Idaho has yellow, right? Yellow is the main color. And here and the symbol of that is like a vandal, right? These almost reckless Vikings or whatever, what do you call it? Tribesmen or whatever, running around, right? That's their sort of regalia, their heraldry, their what they use in terms of their branding. And look at the branding of Washington State University. It's a cougar, as far as I know. But remember, and you're going to laugh when I say this, but you remember I was talking about the wolf of King Road, right? That they're looking for a wolf. Well, at the very next door university, the heraldry is an animal that looks like a predator, and it's obviously not a wolf, but it's pretty close. It's a cougar with its mouth open, sharp teeth, and it's the kind of animal that stalks its prey. Quite an interesting. I mean, I didn't have any idea that that was the case. And you might say, well, that doesn't mean anything. I just think it is quite interesting. And we're going to see another image of this branding in a few seconds later in terms of this image, in terms of this footage. But the other part that's quite interesting with that is, if you think about, Brian would have seen these banners every single day. He would have seen a cougar baring its teeth. And what message is that communicating? Isn't it communicating, be assertive, attack? It's be a predator, be, you get what I'm trying to say? What message subliminally is that communicating to him? Maybe, maybe not. Let's put it up onto full screen. I'm just saying this is the kind of thing he would see every day, that would be on his horizon, in his field of vision every day. Did that have any impact on his thinking, on his psychology?
Who's now director of the criminal justice program at West Texas A&M, he told us this is way outside the norm when it comes to typical criminal justice and criminology students, especially here at Washington State.
So there's a really good perspective of these banners, right? And what it's showing is an aggressive predator. And he's studying at this university. Does that have any bearing on his psychology? And bear in mind, it's a lonely guy who's not seeing a lot of friends. And so what does he keep looking at? Doesn't he keep looking at that? Doesn't he wear a shirt with that emblem on his chest or on his sleeve? Isn't that emblem all over the place when he goes into a classroom, on his stationery, in all of the alerts from the university?
The good ones is 0. I would say of the ones that aren't as good of students, out of 100, I would say, you might have 5. If you wanted to focus on that type of stuff, you could, but I would definitely say that's outside of the norm of what the vast majority of criminologists study.
There's been some speculation that a higher degree in criminal...
Okay, so Diane says, it's not cheaper to drive. My son just did it. And that I think is quite interesting, because wouldn't you imagine that Brian would probably want to exercise the cheaper option, but the cheaper option would mean leaving his vehicle for it to be found. So does that make sense, that they weren't doing it because it was cheaper? He was doing it perhaps for another reason. Thanks a lot for that, Diane. Yeah, that's also true. Okay, let's continue.
Criminology or criminal justice could help someone commit a heinous crime. But the people that we've spoken with in that educational sphere say that is not at all the case. Typically, the curriculum consists of criminal theory. It looks at the efficacy of laws and the application of the criminal justice system. Nothing that would really give someone the tools to commit homicide. Mitch?
It's a good thing they're not teaching them how to get away with murder.
Yeah, so there is another case where that came up, where people thought, did somebody read a blueprint on how to get away with a crime? Anyone know what case you're talking about there? So it's another case that dealt with reading material where they thought this could have helped, potentially helped deal with getting away with a crime. Anyone know what you're talking about? Yeah, that is a long way to drive for sure. Irene says it was a bit furtive, Casey Anthony, I'm thinking about the John Benet Ramsey case where they found the book Mindhunter and it dealt with microscopic evidence and a lot of other things. And there were news headlines literally, did the parents read a what was it, how to murder book or something like that? On that note, I want to bring up something where someone criticized me earlier today on my channel, basically said, how dare you criticize the FBI? Do you think you're smarter than the FBI, right? In terms of the FBI, like there are at least two former FBI people that seem to be saying that Brian's a serial killer. And then there's another expert that said that as well, right? Okay, thanks a lot, Deborah. And in the John Benet Ramsey case, you actually had a FBI agent, former FBI John Douglas, who assessed that case, right? He assessed that case and he decided that John Ramsey was innocent. And I think he also decided that Patsy Ramsey was innocent, right? And ultimately, in that case, the grand jury, when a case went in front of a jury, they decided differently. So in the John Benet Ramsey case, I think you can legitimately ask the question, was the FBI agent that was part of Team Ramsey correct? Because there's another FBI agent, I think his surname was McCreary, who had a totally different assessment, and there was another FBI agent with a different assessment as well, right? In other words, two FBI agents actually disagreed with what John Douglas said. John Douglas has also had certain input into the West Memphis 3 case and also the Amanda Knox case, right? So if you say something like, how dare you disagree with the FBI? What do you know? A lot of people have disagreed with some of these former FBI folks, right? There are a lot of differing opinions. It's not the first time it's ever happened. And in the John Benet Ramsey case, you literally have the grand jury disagreeing with what a former FBI agent said. So please don't treat what the FBI or anyone says as gospel. Think critically, and that's really the thing. Does that make sense? BB says, I'm intrigued, but what is the point? All or most of the students see or wear that school mascot. That's a weird roundabout way of addressing the same thing. I know what you're saying. You're saying everyone's seeing the same heraldry, blah, 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 blah. What we're trying to look at is we're trying to get into the heart and the mind and the spirit of the criminal psychology. So you're trying to look at all the things that he saw. Now, it's totally different seeing something like this. It's totally different seeing something like that if you're a happy student, right? If you having the time of your life and you kind of maybe associate that with passion and with being a roaring success, right? But imagine how that's totally different if you're miserable, if you're angry, if you're discontent, if you are in a coveting scenario. In a way, you could actually be associating, projecting to some extent with the anger of this animal, feeling like I feel like a caged animal. I feel like I want to roar. I feel like I want to do something. So it's important to try and intuit the sights and sounds that the criminal is seeing, feeling, and thinking as far as possible. That's really what we're getting at. And I'm just really highlighting some of the fabric that is obviously coming into his field of view, right? In the Morphew case, the scenario was that Suzanne's husband was a hunter. And then again, you say, what is different in that scenario to say a different scenario, right? That's really all you're doing. Does that make sense? It is a pretty menacing image, definitely. Well, Girl interrupts, says my university was the devil's. Okay. Bear in mind, he's also up at night. He's up late at night. If he gets the munchies and he drives to a convenience store to buy something, his headlights would sort of illuminate that. And to what extent could that inform the psychology? I'm not saying he sees that picture and it programs him to commit a crime. I'm saying that is maybe 5% or 2% of the collective process. That's all. I don't think he killed the dog, no. So I kind of agree that there was no actual violence preceding this, but there was violent, sadistic imagery. I agree with that. If you think about Jeffrey Dahmer, before he committed his first crime, he didn't beat people up or hurt anyone. He was caught up in ideas and images and fantasies of it. And that can be a form of experiencing something without actually doing it. Does that make sense? In the same way that reading things, watching things, I'm just trying to think, playing like violent computer games, that psychology can transfer directly to the real world. I've previously played, when I was a bit younger, games where you like drive a car, right, and you sort of race through town. And sometimes when you're driving in the real world, you get that impulse that you got from Need for Speed to do something reckless or to drive faster, and you realize, whoa, this is the real world. You can't do that sort of thing here. But that is to what extent programming can impact you in the real world, right? And if you obsess about crime, look at the face just above my head. If you obsessing about crime all the time and you're feeling very insufficient and insignificant, isn't there a sense of power and agency that comes across from, for example, a serial killer, where if you'd been watching the Dharma series or something about Ted Bundy, don't you think someone who feels very insignificant in his life thinks, wow, serial killers are treated with so much awe and fear and respect? And I mean, it's respect born out of terror, but nevertheless, there's this yeah, I mean, to use a very bland word, there's this incredible interest in serial killers, right? But look at their agency in terms of how they control their world and exert power. And for a powerless person, committing a crime feels like this instant way of getting power. Obviously, it's an illusion, because actually the moment you commit a crime, you actually technically lose all your power. You actually lost your life. You've lost your freedom. But within that psychology, the criminal psychology, there's the sense that you gain everything instantly. With Chris Watts, he wanted an instant divorce, and so being on the one hand, he's sort of what's the word? He's powerless in his marriage. He's powerless to change his wife's mind. He's powerless to do anything about the pregnancy. But the moment he commits the crime, he instantly reverses that power struggle. On paper, I mean, in reality, he's just literally lost everything at that moment. But if you are in a fantasy world, if you are caught up in that, you're not thinking it through rationally, because you already your reality has been fragmented. Does that make sense? Tanny says his survey never would have passed a committee. He had no intention of considering research ethics. Now, apparently that survey he did was never actually used. And the guy who spoke now said that isn't something, that's not really the sort of thing they generally pay attention to in criminology. Gabel the Rebel. Well, a fourth choice I could give you is, what was it again? I'm struggling to think. Can you remember what I said? The thing that stood out, that he looks older than the victims. He looks substantially older than the victims. That would be the fourth choice. So have a look at the poll right now. What surprised you the most about the latest footage of Brian? He was taller than expected. 46% say that. 11%, so most of you don't think he is particularly good looking. I must say he looks a lot better looking than in all the photos that we've really looked at. If you look at the footage of him walking around and moving, he looks a lot better than all the photos, the still photos. He definitely doesn't photograph very well. Do you guys agree with that? He's not photogenic. And often people who aren't photogenic are camera shy, or they lack confidence in front of a camera. They generally lack confidence. I can tell you that for a fact as someone who's photographed quite a lot of people in my career. Grace says, where's Grace? Well, Wolfie, I don't know if he looks in his 40s, but he definitely looks older than the victims, and he's substantially taller than they are. Oh, Rona Page says none of the above. Okay. Oh, there we are. Grace says, I thought he looked okay. Yeah, he's not photogenic. Okay. So I'm going to go on to something else. Let's see if I can. I'm going to go into this news conference. There's not a lot here, but it just shows the relationship between the two agencies to some extent. And I don't know whether they're going to talk here about those police stops. We'll see.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Adam Reed. I'm the Director of the Communications Office with the Pennsylvania State Police. Thank you for joining us here. The order of speakers is going to be our Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner.
Agents.
Let's jump a little bit ahead.
We understand the best thing we can do for victims and their families is to follow every lead, collect every piece of evidence, and bring those responsible to justice. I am proud of the members of the Pennsylvania State Police who were able to help in this investigation. The cooperative relationship between our local, state, and federal partners stands the test of time. The officers, troopers, and federal agents work together tirelessly, putting in long, difficult hours. Communication and cooperation are imperative to success and to ensure the integrity of the case remains maintained. The culmination of that cooperation ultimately led to take the suspect into custody and afforded the families some sense of peace they deserve. I want to thank the Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police, and our partners in the Federal Bureau of Investigation for their support, assistance, and coordination. I also want to recognize the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. And finally, I need to acknowledge the members of the Pennsylvania State Police, specifically members of Troop N, our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and our Bureau of Emergency and Special Operations, who assisted in safely taking the suspect into custody in the early morning hours of December 30th.
Okay, so on that point, don't you think it's quite interesting that in the same way that the killer attacked the victims when they were asleep, at night when they were asleep, unawares, the police kind of did exactly the same thing. The police attacked, if you want to use that word, the police swooped in at, I think, 1:30 in the morning. It was obviously totally different, where the killer at 112 King Road didn't break anything as far as I know, and I think entered through the front door and exited through the front door, I believe. But when everyone was asleep, the police did exactly the same thing, except broke pretty much, I'm not sure if it's all the doors and windows, but as far as I know, they broke more than one window. In other words, you can imagine they break access points in order to enter there, which means the person inside can't exit. That's the way I understood it. But it's just quite interesting to contrast the way the police perpetrated their capture and the way the killer perpetrated his crime. Both very late at night. Very big difference between the one doing it silently and the other having the law on their side and doing it with no, silent until the moment they broke down the doors, right? As far as I heard, it was 1:30, but I suppose I could be wrong. Okay, let's go on.
As previously indicated by Chief James Fry of the Moscow Police Department, specific details regarding this investigation cannot be released until the suspect is extradited to Idaho and presented with the probable cause affidavit. At this time, I will turn the microphone over to Major Christopher Paris, commander of Area 3, who was involved in the coordinated efforts to take the suspect into custody.
Thank you, Colonel. Area 3 comprises troops F, P, N, and R, and is made up of 1,000 approximately of the women and men, civilian and enlisted, in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania. I'd like to introduce to my left Captain Norm Kramer, who's the commander of Troop N Hazleton, which is comprised of Carbon, Monroe, Columbia, and parts of Luzerne counties. I would like to reiterate, as the Colonel said, that Idaho law prohibits any release of information contained within the affidavits. So we're going to do our best today to talk about what phase we are currently in the investigation. And it has.
So can you see it's not a conspiracy of silence. It's not some kind of weird thing that's going on. Idaho law restricts what the folks in Idaho can say and what the folks in Pennsylvania can say about an Idahoan case, right? It is, they are prohibited because of legal protocols. And there you've just heard it. It's not some grand conspiracy. It's literally, we can't say anything because if we did, we would be breaking the law. We would be running afoul of the law, and that those laws are there to protect the integrity of the case, right? And certain states, I think, are more prescriptive in their laws than others. In Portugal, you may not say anything about the investigation at all, police and suspects. And so in that case, the McCanns hired spokesmen, and then they could then talk on their behalf. That's how they got out of that sort of loophole. But you kind of have different prescriptive aspects to what you can talk about and what you can't. One thing I've noticed is Colorado is particularly strict about talking about cases. And I think it is getting stricter everywhere. It's quite weird. As the media develops and social media develops, the need to protect the integrity of these investigations actually becomes greater, right? You'd think it would be the other way around, that they would just say, you know what, we actually need to be more transparent with the public. They are transparent in terms of saying, I'm the guy in charge of this, and I'm doing that, and at that date that'll happen, but they don't give you really any information, because they're trying to, with all the efforts that have been brought forward, the resources and the investigations, the detectives and so on, what they ultimately want is to have a successful prosecution. And in order to do that, they can't give away any information that is really of any value to us, really, which I guess is basically inculpatory evidence. Any information that would inform us why they think their suspect is guilty outside of a courtroom can get them into serious trouble. Does that make sense? It's not some kind of conspiracy and some game that's being played or some kind of political machinations. It's simply that's what the law prescribes. And so any case that happens going forward, you should expect not to get a lot of information from the authorities, but they might volunteer a certain amount of information, such as we're looking for a white Hyundai. Yeah, that turned out to be crucial information. It's one of the few snippets that law enforcement volunteered, and look how important that turned out to be.
Has entered a new phase with the waiver for extradition, and the continuing primary goal is the seeking of justice through successful prosecution and conviction, bearing the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So with that in mind, we're trying to balance essentially two things: the public's desire for information against the need to maintain the integrity of the investigation and protect the suspects, accused at this point's due process. So I'll now attempt to give you an operational picture.
I just want to respond to this comment from Susan. I think it's the opposite. I think his parents are overprotective. And we've dealt with this previously, but overprotective parents actually create over-anxious kids. And in some cases leads to kids being deceptive. They lie to deal with problems that they don't really know how to deal with otherwise. And can also lead to depression, especially in a college situation and high school situation. where mom and dad aren't there to bail you out of your thing. So I don't think I think they were overprotective. And if you want to apply that intertextually, weren't Brian Laundrie's parents overprotective? Weren't Chris Watts's parents, actually, I don't know about that. But yeah, weren't Brian Laundrie's parents overprotective? And when you've got overprotective parents and someone is in a situation, someone that has been spoiled, and in a situation that is quite difficult to figure out, then they may get a sense of almost like panicky indignation. I don't really want to have to deal with this crap. Normally, mommy or daddy deals with it. Now I've got to deal with it. And but the issue is they don't know how to deal with it. So I don't think it's what you were saying there.
Picture with the best information I can release at the time. So this begins when the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation troopers were contacted by the FBI about assisting with surveillance of the accused in this case.
Thanks.
I'd like to take the opportunity to specifically thank several individuals. Special Agent in Charge Jackie McGuire and Assistant Special Agent in Charge.
So that's also a really good point, is the worst deceivers, I suppose you could also say the best deceivers, the people who deceive in the most effective way are addicts, right? You cannot be a drug addict without being someone who lies all the time. You try and protect the, not integrity, but you try and protect the activities and behaviors that you're doing that you really aren't really supposed to be doing. And it becomes a lifestyle, you become a habitual liar. So that aspect does lend itself to crime. I often say not all liars are murderers, but all murderers are liars.
Dave Carter from the Philadelphia Field Division, as well as Supervisory Special Agent Bill Vigorito of the Scranton RA. We're very lucky in PSP to have a collaborative relationship with the Bureau, both in Pennsylvania and beyond, and their people are absolutely excellent. So as the investigation progressed, Troop N Criminal Investigation Section, commanded by Captain Kramer over my left shoulder here, began to collaborate with authorities in Idaho. Specifically, I'd like to acknowledge Lieutenant James Curto, who was here today.
So is that right? I see quite a few of you are saying that he was arrested at 3 a.m. Is that right? I don't know where I got the 1:30 from. But I mean, if it is 3 a.m., then he was arrested about the same time that the murders were committed. Quite an irony, if that is the case.
Sergeant Anthony Ferdinand, Corporal John Chulak, who is not present with us, and Troopers Leary and Knoll, who are here with us today. It was through this collaboration and the charges pending in Idaho that those troopers were able to obtain search warrants and a fugitive from justice warrant that was prepared here in Monroe County for the location in Chestnut Hill Township and the fugitive from justice warrant for Mr. Kohberger, respectively. I'd like to acknowledge the Monroe County District Attorney, David Christine, as well as First Assistant Mike Mancuso and their entire office. The support that we received was absolutely excellent. Once those warrants were obtained, the Bureau of Emergency Inspection.
So yeah, that's how I understood it, that he was taken into custody at about 1:30 a.m. That's how I understood it. I did see somewhere where someone said about 3 a.m., but that is the way I understood it. So what do you guys say? I was right, you were wrong, or don't trust Fox News? What do you guys say? I don't know.
Special Operations, BSO, coordinates our Special Emergency Response Team, CERT. They were selected to serve those warrants, the three search warrants and the fugitive from justice warrant. To define what CERT is, it's a full-time tactical team maintained by PSP to deal with high-risk warrant situations, barricades, and other incidents requiring specialized tactical training or other capabilities. From their perspective, we essentially task them to go out and serve a arrest warrant for someone accused of a quadruple murder. They're activated several hundred times a year throughout the Commonwealth. We don't typically hear of their work in a forum like this because they serve the warrant, the person's taken into custody, and they go about their assignment. They are the ultimate professionals. It's a volunteer team. They're highly trained and highly motivated. Captain Norm Kramer over my left shoulder was assigned as the top comm for the CERT activation, which means he was responsible for coordinating our tactical preparations. So tactical assets were then staged in the county, in Monroe County, into the evening of Thursday, December 29th, last Thursday. And in the early hours of Friday, December 30th, those warrants were executed at the location. Mr. Kohberger was taken into custody without incident. The scene was turned over to the FBI Evidence Response Team for processing. Mr. Kohberger was then turned over to the Monroe County Prison, where he has remained in their custody since. I'd like to thank the Monroe County Sheriff and the Stroud Regional Police Department for their support as well during the extradition process. Arrangements currently are being made to deliver Kohberger back to Idaho, where he can have continued due process and face these charges.
So what do you guys think of, as far as I'm aware, the moment he crosses the border, I heard this somewhere, the moment he crosses the state border, I don't know whether you would say the moment the airplane crosses Idaho airspace, but basically the moment that he's back in Idaho, they actually legally, I think they're compelled to release the probable cause affidavit. Bear in mind, he's in custody. So it's actually his right to be made aware of the charges against him. And it's also the right of the public to be made aware of those charges as well. Thanks, Felicia. So I kind of did a calculation. It takes 4.5 hours to fly from Pennsylvania to Idaho. And then if you look at the time that he appeared in court, and maybe you add half an hour or an hour, maybe longer, then you could reasonably guess the time that the probable cause affidavit would come out. So I don't know whether we're going to see that affidavit in the next 2-3 hours. I don't know. I've just done a Google search now, and as far as I can see, it's not out. It's not out yet. Let's just check. Yeah, it's not out. Definitely not out yet. So I don't know. I think there's a chance that it could be out in a couple of hours, but I guess there's also a chance it could be tomorrow. Yeah, Dover says they're not going to release it, could be in 10 days. I'm just saying that the source that I saw said basically the moment he's in, unless it's challenged, unless they oppose it, the normal legal flow will be the moment that he is in Idaho, it actually has to be released. So we'll see. Thanks a lot, Anne. Wow, never seen a super chat just for love your accent. Timmy, come. Ooh, don't put your foot on there. Ugh, that was close. Okay. Let's continue a little bit further. So I must say the probable cause affidavit, we will probably learn things like how the killer accessed the house. So did he go in through the front door? This will be their theory. Did he go in through the front door? Did he come out the side door? Did he go in the side door, come out the front door? Also, probably his connection to the house and to the victims. And also the various cameras that picked up, probably not just those that we know about, others that we didn't know about, that picked up his vehicle. There'll probably also be crucial cell phone data and probably also crucial social media information. And I think some of the most vital information will be DNA. I think it'll show to what extent and where they got the DNA in the house. And I've got an idea, it's not like one little sample somewhere, it's multiple samples. I don't think that that has been a very difficult aspect, although we do know that those CSIs went back there. I see we had almost 2 hours. So I think I'll stay on for another 9 minutes. Let's move
So
this
with
on
that, I will
to
turn it over
the
to First
questions
Assistant
from reporters.
Mike Mancuso.
What does Mike
Thank you,
Mancuso say?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Mancuso with the DA's office, the First Assistant District Attorney. I want to give my condolences to the families of the victims
Thanks,
out in
Rona.
Idaho for their loss. It's my sincere hope that this marks a clear step in the right direction of effectuating justice for those folks. My office's role was relatively recent. We weren't advised of the presence of the defendant in our county until only a couple days before the apprehension of the defendant.
So, we were saying, were the cops sort of told to intervene? If he'd only given the date there, if he'd said a date, that would have given us some idea, but unfortunately he didn't.
But when we were told, we came together and worked very closely.
No, I
with,
don't think he
Captain,
was the
Kramer,
guy.
who did an excellent job in almost like a clockwork operation.
Welcome,
Part
Midwest
of
Nurse.
my
Welcome.
duties were to ensure that 3 separate search warrants were issued. Those affidavits attached to those search warrants are still under seal, so I can't discuss their contents with you. But one was for the person of Mr. Kohberger, collecting DNA and photographs, that sort of thing. One was for the white alarm.
So I think that is a worthwhile question to address. Why are the cops so proud of themselves? Well, I think you could see this in a totally different way. First of all, they could have broken into the house and there could have been a altercation. There could have been actually loss of life. I mean, anytime someone forcibly enters someone else's residence, all sorts of things can go wrong. So first of all, they executed that pretty well. I don't know whether the SWAT team is specifically Pennsylvania cop SWAT team. I would presume it is, or Pennsylvania FBI. I'm not quite sure how it works. The other thing is, if you think about the Caitlin Armstrong case, they didn't have her in custody, but they had her in a sort of interrogation scenario. When they looked again, she was out of the country. So it was possible that they could actually have lost Brian. I mean, he'd already gotten all the way to Pennsylvania. It was possible that something similar to that could have happened, and then it didn't happen. Think also about the Gabby Petito case, where there was surveillance on Brian Laundrie, and then they actually lost him. They were like watching Brian Laundrie, and I think they made some stupid mistake, like they thought Roberta was Brian because she was wearing a cap, and then they totally lost track of Brian. And it ended up being this incredibly expensive manhunt. So, you might say everything went according to plan. What are you so proud of? Well, everything went according to plan. A lot of things may not go according to plan. And also that vehicle going on a trajectory to Pennsylvania, it could have actually turned somewhere and gone somewhere off the grid at the last moment. How would they have known? So I actually think that they have done quite a good job. Thank you so much, Run the World. Thanks a lot. And thank you, Wolfie. Let's continue with this.
Vehicle, which I understand has been seized and is being processed, and one was for the address, the residence itself that he was living in with his family. I was at the scene, and I have to say that Major Paris and Captain Norm Kramer did an outstanding job in coordinating the efforts, not only of the numerous Pennsylvania State Police troopers there, but officers from other jurisdictions and disciplines within those jurisdictions to make this a very smooth, highly competent professional operation. It is a quirk, apparently. It's not in the norm of the states I'm familiar with that Idaho does not release their probable cause affidavit in support of their arrest warrant until after their defendant is returned to that state. But having read those documents and the sealed affidavits of probable cause, I definitely believe that one of the main reasons the defendant chose to waive extradition and hurry his return back to Idaho was the need to know what was in those documents.
That's fascinating, right? So he's, I think he's the Pennsylvania DA. He says he's read the probable cause affidavit, and he's saying he's got no doubt the reason why Kohberger is waiving the whole extradition thing is because Kohberger can't wait to see what they have on him. And I think it's quite a good point. Let's listen to that again. Thanks so much, Sharon. Appreciate it. I hope I haven't gotten back too far.
I believe that one of the main reasons the defendant chose to waive extradition and hurry his return back to Idaho was the need to know what was in those documents. So that's a significant development. Beyond that,
it looks like it's perspiring.
Looking at the scope of the situation and the ties this defendant has to my county, I would hold our office at the disposal of the Idaho authorities to help facilitate a complete background investigation into the defendant.
So I must say that gives me a little bit of pause, right? So you've heard multiple FBI agents. I don't know if they've got the inside scoop. I mean, that could be the case, but you've heard multiple FBI agents saying, check this guy's background. He could be a serial killer. Now, you've just heard the DA who's read the probable cause affidavit saying, you guys are welcome to, I'm at your disposal if you want me to do a background check. This is based on him reading the probable cause affidavit. So it kind of makes me wonder what else is there. You know, and obviously if they go into his browser history and they look at what he's been saying and doing and whatever, who knows where that'll lead. I know one of the experts said they need to check everywhere where he's lived and start digging up those properties. Make of that what you will. But I mean, yeah, you actually have the DA basically echoing that sentiment, saying we need to check his background here in my state.
Both activities prior to the murders occurring within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and his activities after the murders in Pennsylvania. So we stand ready to assist with that effort on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
We can now open it up for questions.
Okay.
What state police specifically did, or
Can you guys hear me?
the operations of state police when you were notified? You talked about putting tactical in the area. How long were they there?
Yeah, well, they know.
We're not in a position to give you an exact time. It was.
They know what is in the probable cause affidavit for sure. I'm not sure if that was about the time of the arrest. Let's just have a look. BB says. Yeah, okay. I don't know. Do you think he was doing this for fame? You know, based on how he furtively looks at the camera, you know, he's not trying to eyeball the camera very much. I think that was a question at what time was he arrested?
In the area, how long were they there? And what's the?
We're not in a position to give you an exact time. It was at some point prior to when the surveillance was taken, as the investigation progressed to a point where search warrants could be obtained, and the probable cause for those search warrants and an arrest warrant, a fugitive from justice warrant based on the arrest warrant out in Idaho were obtained. We began to take the tactical steps to plan to serve them.
Were you collecting evidence prior to his arrest?
At this point, like we said, it's very much pertinent to what's in the affidavits, which we cannot speak about.
What's it about his demeanor when the arrest actually happened?
Present sense impression, as likewise ongoing investigation, can't discuss it.
How, dropping 69 News, how is Kohberger being transported back to Idaho?
Those arrangements are being discussed right now, as well as the logistics. The court order says, those of you who heard it today, it's within the next 10 days. So we're currently working on that in coordination.
Okay, so someone said something about the next 10 days. I stand corrected. I didn't really know that I thought they would just fly him back, but I guess it is a next 10 days thing. Who knows, they may actually surprise us. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth May. Thanks very much.
With authorities out in Idaho. Sir? I can't comment. I don't know.
Is he being held in the Monroe County jail until he's extradited, or is he removed to another?
No, he is lodged in the, since he was dropped off there Friday morning, he's resided in Monroe County Prison.
Still, until he's
Correct,
extradited,
yes.
he'll be there. Are the marshals moving him, or?
Okay, so BB says he needed that ingredient. Whoever he chose, he needed to have that as part of the mix. I do think he chose the killer, right? The killer chose the victims and killed more than one victim because he felt he deserved that amount of, how can I put it? That is the amount that he needed to restore his esteem, right? Let me do it like that, right? I think it's more personal. I don't really see it as fame. It's a personal, it's like a private achievement. I mean, a criminal doesn't really want the whole world to know who they are. I mean, if he can get away with it, then he gets that fame, but it's indirect. He doesn't want to actually be caught and then, hi, it's me. That's not really what he wants. First of all, he wants to redress what he considers personal injustice. But secondly, obviously he hopes he can get away with the crime, and then it gives him a thrill to think, I've outsmarted everybody. And there is such a thing as duping delight. Criminals are delighted, they do get an inflated sense of themselves when they get away with something, right? And obviously that's a lot different when they catch him, and then he spends the rest of the time in the slammer. So I don't think he committed the crime and like, well, if they catch me, I'm going to be famous. I really don't think that's the case. I do think the fact that 4 people were killed, he wanted to experience their pain. In other words, he wanted to feel their pain and watch their pain and have them suffer, right? So there's this element of sadism involved. And he wanted it to tear through the fabric of not only the household in that neighborhood, but of Moscow. And so in that sense, it was him exerting power that he doesn't actually have, him exerting power and then getting a sense of agency through that. But I'm not sure if you mean fame, that he wanted to be famous. He wants agency. And it's not famous in terms of I want my face on the cover of Crime magazine or whatever. He wants the private knowledge that he's cleverer than everyone else. And we've kind of got that sense that was true all along, that he likes to be the smartest in the room, and he tries to make complicated explanations for simple concepts. So he definitely is trying to prove what a man he is and what a mastermind is, and I think he's kind of proved the opposite. I don't know what you guys think. Has he proved himself such an incredible whatever? Okay, let's deal with a couple more questions.
Which group? At this point, that's still being coordinated between the state police and the authorities out there. We don't know.
Will the affidavit be unsealed when he arrives in Idaho?
I don't want to speak out of my lane. When I watched the press conference on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I was alerted to the fact that according to Idaho state law, that the affidavits have to be served to him once he's extradited back before they could be unsealed.
Did he say, has anyone else been arrested?
Ongoing investigation.
So as I understand that the moment he arrives in Idaho, then they've actually got to hand it over to him. It's that prescriptive. It's that clear. And the moment he gets it, everyone gets it.
I can't comment on that either. I apologize.
Who transports him, sir? Does Pennsylvania State Police, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department?
He's presently back. He was transported from the courthouse by Monroe County Sheriff. And the logistics of who's going to transport him out to Idaho are still being discussed. We don't know yet.
Can you confirm the time of his arrest and how much law enforcement presence there actually was?
I would say it was in the early morning hours of Friday, December 30th. Tactical assets on scene were probably in the neighborhood of 50.
Were you afraid he was going to get tipped off before you got him?
I would say overall about this entire operation, and the credit goes, this is a part that the state police played humbly. You look at Moscow Police Department, 38 sworn, 19,000 leads.
Well, if you think about that, there were 50 officers in part of the swoop, which I think is double or triple the entire Moscow PD, that entire office in Moscow. It puts things in perspective, doesn't it?
The video evidence that they had to develop in order to put that out, all public source information. But when you talk about the service of a high-risk warrant for someone who's committed or alleged to have committed 4 homicides, there's nothing routine about that. And all of those tactical steps that were taken were in conjunction with the best efforts of the authorities, local, state, and federal, both in Idaho and here, to ensure that we could do it safely.
I don't think he will try to represent himself. He's already got a lawyer. He's already got a public defender. I think it's quite interesting that he's got a public defender. That also shows the family's not particularly moneyed.
And to ensure that we could get him into custody and that those service or the search warrants could occur.
Sir, can we ask a question of the first assistant district attorney? Mr. Mancuso, you described having read to a degree the contents of that affidavit of probable cause.
Thanks a lot, Anne. Thank you. Wow, that's I really appreciate that. For me, you must say thank you.
That as well, since you can't read. Can you give us an indication
Thank you.
of the seriousness of what you did read? I know you can't talk about it, but can you share with us something?
Yeah, I can't get into the details, sir, but I can say it involved the defendant's connection to a scene of a crime consisting of 4 murdered people. So that's the significance of it.
Can you confirm that there is a connection between Brian Kohberger and any of the victims?
I can't discuss that.
How confident are you that he is guilty of these crimes?
That wouldn't be my place to say. Certainly confident enough that there was ample probable cause for the issuance of the various warrants in the case.
What was your reaction?
So did you get that ample probable cause? That is already giving you an idea that, if you think he's a serial killer and he's committed a crime before, well, he's left behind ample evidence to arrest him, not just sufficient probable cause, ample. Bibi says, I think he looked up to BTK. Some people are calling him BCK. I think people are jumping the gun here with the whole serial killer thing. I think a lot of media people are trying to, I don't know if they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, just trying to create feverish excitement and trying to make the killer worse than that he is. And then you're also getting creators doing the same thing. And obviously it benefits them, that they profit through this excitement. I personally don't see the serial killer thing. And I've referred to cases where someone committed triple murder. So that's Chris Watts and Henry van Breda. You say, yes, but those are family murders. Well, yes, and there's also Elliot Rodger, who knifed 3 of his roommates, and he had no prior criminal history either. And I've written 2 books on mass shooters. And mass shooters, typically, there's one explosive event and then that's it. Nobody ever asks of a mass shooter, oh, are you a serial killer? Did you actually kill people previously? It's ridiculous. Serial killers are subtle. Serial killers start slowly, typically, and they're only found out far down the line, right? And it's become harder and harder for serial killers to get away with what they're doing because of modern technology and modern police approaches. Definitely getting harder and harder. So I personally don't see the serial killer thing, but who knows? Maybe we'll see.
When you heard this, you've all talked about, you followed this. This happened states away. When you get that call, or you all get the call that this person could be right here in your home area, what's your reaction?
Yeah, that's true. So the difference that I'm talking about is someone who's lived in a fantasy can commit quite a serious crime, and that's not going from 0 to committing a serious crime. The fantasy leads, rolls out the red carpet to that. Chris Watts was caught up in a fantasy with his mistress. Jeffrey Dahmer was caught up in a fantasy world before he committed his very first crime. So the fantasy lays out that fabric. Does that make sense? Thanks a lot, Miami Lifestyle. Thanks very much. Okay, let's try and play a couple more questions.
Well, I was
Timmy,
surprised,
stop farting.
really, Monroe County of all places. It hits close to home.
I don't think he skinned the dog.
I would think under the circumstances.
Do you know when he and his father left Idaho or Washington and drove to Pennsylvania, what that date was?
No, I don't know the exact date.
I actually think that he is, I do think the incel label actually does fit him. I think he's an oddball. I think he is lonely. I don't think he has a girlfriend. I don't think he's had a lot of girlfriends. So I actually think the incel thing actually fits. But it's not a perfect fit. It's not, he's not Elliot Rodger. Yeah.
Approximately, we understand the middle of December, is that correct?
I think that's approximate.
And what about, we heard reports that they were stopped not once but twice on the highway. Can you elaborate?
I'll defer to his Pennsylvania public defender on that.
Do you have reason to believe that?
I agree with that. SW5 says, wow, I disagree. There's something that someone said here that I want to... Valentine says, I think the insult does suit him. So that is not a... I mean, that is actually quite an important thing to say. You've got to be careful. In so many of the books that I've written about criminals, what you see is them giving themselves over to fantasy world, that they literally get caught up in fairy tales, right? They literally get caught up in fairy tale thinking. And if you think about it, anybody who is addicted, anybody who is fixated on something, obsessed with something. Anyone who is not being realistic is also not being realistic on, if I do this, what's likely to happen. Part of the fairy tale is also, if I do this and I get away with it, it's going to be so easy, right? And so there is actually a rational aspect to don't have fantasies. Try and be realistic. I actually got an email today from a self-help channel that I never actually even pay attention to, but the theme was don't have dreams, kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, but basically saying it's a new year. Don't start your new year with dreams that you're going to end up feeling bad about. Like, I wish I could be thin again. You need to have goals, not dreams. And so I want to encourage you guys to apply that to your own lives. Don't have fantasies in your own lives. Have goals, have plans, be realistic. It's when you're unrealistic that you can, and have high expectations, and that you full of wishes and magical thinking, that you're going to be sorely disappointed. Put in real effort, be effective, be assertive, be intelligent in the way you deal with your real life. Thanks so much, Bibi. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your questions as well. Wolfie says, why do you think there was no essay? Yeah, exactly. There was no time. I don't think that was his primary motive, although I think it was a important driver. So I think he was very frustrated and very resentful and jealous and all those things. I also think it shows to what extent he's internalized the fact of his impotency, but he definitely wouldn't have had time.
Kohberger is connected to other crimes and unsolved mysteries in the area.
I wouldn't answer that question at this time.
You start looking at some that may be unsolved where he was around.
That would be a normal thing to do.
Question for the BSP here. Said he was taken without incident. Was it safe to say that, I shouldn't say it's safe to say, but did it seem like he was expecting?
I wouldn't comment on what his present sense was. I would just comment that the professionalism of the CERT team and their tactical training definitely proved in a situation like this to do it in the most tactically sound and fastest way possible.
Was there anybody else in the house at the time?
His parents were in the house at the time.
Did they say anything to you?
Again,
Okay, so that's quite a good question. What did he covet? It looked like he coveted normal life, but I suppose you could say normal student life. He coveted all the things that were sort of normal. So kids with friends, kids with relationships, kids having fun, kids going and having a party together, kids having the sort of life that they were having, that they deserved, that he felt he deserved. He coveted kind of a normal situation, but within a gratuitous setting. So a girlfriend, friends, fun, basically the kaleidoscope of what is going on in the fun house. That is what he wanted. The color, the fun, the excitement, the sexual satisfaction, the status of becoming someone, the thrill of developing agency and finding other people that also developing theirs and becoming someone. At college, you are becoming a person, and he was unbecoming. Makes sense?
I can't comment on that ongoing investigation.
That's it.
Force was used. The warrants were issued for evening search warrants, which in Pennsylvania requires additional probable cause in order to serve them at the hours of darkness. I would defer to the first assistant to talk about the legal burden that you bear in order to obtain those. But from a tactical standpoint, based upon all of the briefings that we had developed and all of the intelligence we had developed, we thought that was the best time to serve it.
And what's your thought that Pennsylvania was involved with this?
We were alerted by the FBI. Troopers in the Bureau of Criminal Investigation were alerted.
Anything on like his social media pages that tip anything?
I can't comment. I don't.
Has parents been cooperative in this whole process?
Can't comment. Ongoing, like I said. State police's role here was to serve the warrants and assist with the surveillance, which we've done. We've been part of major investigations. You know, these are men and women who take an oath to protect their.
Okay, so I want to play out just with the footage we saw in the beginning of Kohberger arriving in court and leaving. I want to just play out with watching him leave the sheriff's transport and leaving the court as well. And we've been talking about, is this someone who's hypervigilant? Is this someone who's sensitive, lonely, coveting, almost like a bird, a furtive sort of bird? And is his biggest problem self-esteem? And I want you to think about that as we play out with these final images. I just want to thank everyone who's been here. It's been a really good conversation, especially with, thanks a lot, Sharon and Terry and Stephanie. Thanks a lot, you guys, for being here. Welcome to all the new members, all the new subscribers. Thanks very much for being such a good chat. There hasn't really been any nastiness. Really appreciate that. And then also thank you for the super chats. Really appreciate it. I'm not doing a lot of lives now, just because there are so many power failures and it's difficult to produce the amount of content on a turnaround schedule when your research gets kind of cut through halfway through. And so I just can't do so many lives. I will do a live on the probable cause affidavit. But otherwise, I'm going to try and be doing short updates. So look out for that. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much, all of you guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jay Hughes. Okay, so Timmy says thank you as well. Timmy, come on, shut up. He's sleeping. He's definitely almost out for the count. So yeah, I just want to thank you guys very much. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about the channel when things slow down a little bit. The 100,000 and the journey to get here and all that sort of thing. I actually, when I started this channel, for a long time, I didn't even monetize the channel because I was using this channel just to market my books. I wasn't trying to make money out of it. And I was months into the channel before I even realized, wow, I can just turn on monetization kind of thing. So it's quite an interesting journey, and I'd love to play you some of the very first videos. You'll probably laugh, but I would like to do that, but I'll probably do that at a later stage. Anyway, some of you have come a long way with me, and I really appreciate that. Some of you guys are new, and hopefully we'll have a brilliant journey together. Take care, Toggle Trent. Thanks so much. Remember, yep, I am going to be doing more audiobooks. Where's that comment? Yeah, that's the one. Bear in mind, if you're really enjoying this community, there is the Patreon component. It's patreon.com/TCRS. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, so you can kind of get a better idea of what's going on those platforms as well. Thanks, guys. Take care. I'm going to play out with some footage of Kohberger earlier today. So you're not going to see me after this. So thank you. Take care. Good night. And I'll see you guys next time.
This is Brian Kohberger, the accused killer of 4 college students, as he made his way into a Pennsylvania courtroom. He waived his extradition hearing. He will be on his way back to Idaho sometime over the course of the next several days, but it could be as soon as tonight. And we could learn even more about what happened inside that house in Moscow. Kohberger was, of course, arrested on Friday. News Nation has learned he was a PhD student at a nearby university studying criminology. Let's bring in now senior national correspondent Brian Enton. Brian, you are there in Pennsylvania.